Hey, everybody, welcome to Gaze Ahead. I have the pleasure of speaking with Monica Bodurka today. Monica is the co-founder of the Leadership Wellness Group, a firm that specializes in resilience coaching for teams and individuals in high-performing jobs through workshops, training, and coaching. Monica has a Bachelor of Arts, an MBA, a degree in adult education. Not only that, she's a yoga teacher and she's a yoga therapist. Monica is working on her first book as well. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Melanie.
Oh my goodness, me too. So I'm going to just jump in right away and say your work is so important. Your work is so important. We need to draw that connection between performance, ambition, and mindfulness in the workplace, at home. And a lot of what you do, from what I can read and from our previous conversations, is exactly that. Our leaders need these superpowers in order to live their best lives and be the best leaders that they can be. So I want to jump right in and talk about, performance enhancement and resilience in this busy world that we live in. So for busy people, leaders that have no time in their schedules at work or at home, where would we even start to think about mindfulness?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a great question. I think I didn't expect actually to start with mindfulness, but I think it's all about mindfulness. So it's actually a perfect introduction. Many people think of mindfulness as meditating for a long period of time, I don't know, under a tree in nature, and it's production. It's not something that you do throughout the day constantly, right? The definition of mindfulness is paying attention in the moment, not judgmentally, right? So the idea is we're paying attention. So as a leader, you're paying attention to your staff. You're paying attention, and you're fully paying attention. So think about our world right now. We have trained ourselves to be unfocused, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember this was several years ago. I was part of this program, Search Inside Yourself, put on by Google, right? And mindfulness program. And it was really interesting because Mark Lessard, who started it, was talking about this idea that our attention span right now, the average adult, is something like 8 seconds. Oh my God. So there we are trying to, as leaders, make better decisions more of the time, right? Like, think it's a lot about decisions, a lot about, strategy and what to do and resolving problems. And meanwhile, you can't focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness is about being fully present with what you're doing. It's fully being present with your team, being fully present with whether it's a problem, being fully present with your vision, whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? And then constantly regrouping, because right now what we're doing is we'll be working on something and then we're off and then we're distracted and we completely forgot what we were working on. So it's about constantly. I actually had one meditation teacher beautifully describe it, and I actually like to draw it. It's like skiing, right? So you sort of go out and you come back in, you go out and you come back in, but slowly you're coming in more and more and staying there, right? So think of a really grounded leader who can tune into their intuition, tune into, recall sort of all the things they've learned in their experience, right? It's about being fully present in that moment.
Fully present. Yeah. And the idea of focus as
Right.
well. Yeah. The idea of focus.
Yeah, it's right, because we're all, and we've trained ourselves, because of, I'm holding up my phone here, because of our phones, we've trained ourselves to constantly be distracted. So one of the things is, I always tell people I work with, first thing you want to do is shut off all your notifications. Because if it's a real emergency, somebody's going to call you. So you don't need constant pinging and emails and things, because every time you're doing that, you are training your brain to be unfocused, right? So that's a very simple thing to do right away, and just tune in all the time. And then, in the beginning, that might not be something we naturally do. So, or we're not naturally used to doing it. So you might have to put reminders for yourselves in your calendar. So between meetings, scheduling 5 minutes between the meeting to take a breath, using triggers. before you walk into a meeting. A great colleague I've worked with for a long time Michelle Millen taught me this, really, and teaches this to her clients, really using the power of triggers. So again, before you enter a room, right? So now people are going back into the office, okay? Noticing maybe as they're entering a room, that I've got anxiety now, right? About going into this room, about maybe getting sick, right? But the moment you notice it, you're able to deal with it. So you breathe into it and say, I'm fine. We're all fine, right? Right now in this moment, I'm okay, right? Not
Mhm.
going into some kind of future scary story that you've created. So using your phone as a trigger as well. So the phone rings before you answer it, letting it ring a few times and taking a few mindful breaths, setting intention as you pick up that phone of how you want to be on this call before you start a meeting. Same idea, taking a breath,
Mhm.
setting an intention, right? So that's the mindfulness for a leader. It's constant throughout the day. If you're waiting to have a coffee, waiting as your water boils to make a tea, there's a good minute or 30 seconds taking some mindful breaths into
So
diaphragm. Sorry, yeah.
yeah, so you're not talking about scheduling extra time. You're
Nope.
talking about using those brief moments between activities in your day to
Yeah.
check in with yourself. Is that what I'm hearing?
Check in and connect into um, so you check in, you say, oh, you might notice your stress, but even you might not even have to go that far. What I do is I will just, and this is what I work with clients on, um, you're making that tea, taking a deep diaphragmatic breath, right? We tend to breathe into
Mhm.
our shoulders and neck. And that's sending a message to our central nervous system that we're actually stressed. So what you're doing instead is so you're waiting for your tea to boil, you roll your shoulders back and you take a big breath into your diaphragm, right? Into your upper abdomen. And guess what's there is your vagus nerve, right? Your vagus nerve runs from your brain all throughout. It's beautiful. It's called the vagus means wandering nerve. So it's a wandering nerve. It connects into your various organs, but it kind of has this interesting crisscross in the diaphragm. So basically, when you're doing a deep diaphragmatic breath, what you're doing is you're massaging that diaphragm, that vagus nerve, which connects right directly into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest
Mhm.
and digest, which is the system under which your prefrontal cortex, your decision making brain, works best. So that's what we want to do as leaders. We want to be using our rational executive function of prefrontal cortex. We don't want to be in our reptilian brain. We don't want to be in our limbic brain, which is where our habits and emotions are, which is where our amygdala fires. We want to calm ourselves as much as we can. So we are using our executive function as much of the day as possible.
I like that. And so does it take, one or two? Can you get the effects that you're talking about with just one or two breaths, or do you have to sit there for 5 minutes and have deep belly breaths, in your
No,
opinion?
I think I mean, you can train yourself to do it all the time and a lot. I'm actually, I'm actually, I speak regularly, meet regularly with a woman who's a police officer, and she's the sort of the head of her unit. So she's using it all the time
Mm,
when she is and when she knows she's going into a stressful situation, when she's in her car, when she grounds herself and takes that deep belly breath, and she's noticed a tremendous impact, not only on, you know, like it's the one tool she's really holding on to, right? So I think when you sometimes say, oh, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes, and then you never have that 10 minutes, you don't know it. Whereas if it's something you can do throughout the day, just even
mhm,
for a few breaths, right? So if you were to take a deep belly breath, and not belly, I mean, we don't have, our diaphragm is in our upper abdomen. So
okay.
you're breathing into your abdomen, through your nose, never through your mouth, because at the moment you start breathing through your mouth, you're sending a signal to your body that you're running, you're in danger, right? There might be a bear chasing you, right? So what you're doing is you're breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your nose deeply into your upper diaphragm. Um, And then what you do is on the exhale, you actually contract your belly, right? So your lower abdomen, right? You contract it in and up. And then what you do is then you contract fully. And then the next inhale, something magical happens. Your diaphragm, you're actually able to breathe in a little deeper, right? So we're expanding our breath capacity as well, right? So the more we breathe, and it's kind of like this beautiful, like I see kind of like it's a stretching and it's a calming kind of breath, right? So you do that a few times, and right away, it doesn't take a lot of breaths to start tuning into that basic.
Yeah, and the creation of space,
Mhm,
the creation of space for creativity, the creation of space for calm,
absolutely.
and these tools that we can have in our back pocket. So simple, the breath, so simple, but
And
these
yeah,
tools that you can have to help your performance throughout the day and how you react to situations and become more resilient in
absolutely.
situations.
Well, it does, because what it's doing is it's helping you. Again, you're using your central nervous system to stay calm, which means that then you're able to respond as opposed to react in a situation of adversity, right? When we talk about resilience, we're often talking about something happens, right? Right, something unforeseen, right? So that then again, so you can now respond as opposed to react in from that reptilian brain, or from, and have that fight or flight response, right? So
Mhm.
so this is huge, and really this kind of deep um, diaphragmatic abdothoracic breathing is what it's called, is really one of the sort of keys. And it's like it becomes like a superpower, and a super tool, and we all have it, and it costs us nothing.
Costs us
um,
nothing.
Perfect, like and we
Let's
all can do it. Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about resilience, the word resilience. I know you work with different types of clients. Is resilience something we're born with and we lose, or is resilience something that we can build over time? Tell me about your thoughts and how you work with customers on this.
Okay, perfect. Well, oh my gosh, where do we start? So resilience, let's start with the Webster Dictionary. So Webster says resilience is your capacity to bounce back, right? When something happens, adversity strikes. So in sort of the natural sciences, let's say a metal would be considered resilient if you could if you could bend it, and then it will come back to its shape, right? So you're holding a metal, you bend it, and then it's able to quote unquote bounce back. Now, when you actually look at research, right, into resilience, and there's been a lot right now, but when I started this work, this it wasn't as popular an area as it is now since the pandemic. But when you look at it, you start to realize it's a little bit more than just bouncing back. First of all, it's not just about bouncing back. There is an integrating process where you learn from the experience, right? So that's the first thing. So we don't bounce back to what is. We are never the same person. And hopefully you have a growth mindset. And if something adverse has happened and you've overcome it and you're stronger for it, you're actually better than you were before. So that's the first thing. But coming back to what is resilience, right? The way I like to teach it is two ways. One is, and COVID is a perfect example. The bumps in the road will always be there, and we can't foresee them, right? You can't. I mean, sometimes if it's on your road, you can, but like the idea is you don't know when the bumps will there. And resilience is a little bit like having shock absorbers, right?
Okay.
So the idea is if you've got well-developed shock absorbers, that road will be a little less bumpy for you, right? So for one person going on it, they might be bouncing all over the place and they fall apart, right? And for the other person, they just glide through it easily with grace and ease, and it's not a big deal. And we all know those people, right? When I teach these workshops, the first thing we start with is we say, okay, well, think of someone that is resilient, and always they're like, wow, they seem to be calm, they seem to be able to
Mhm.
handle things that happen. They seem to have this real sense of humor about it. Like, where does this come from? Well, what you realize, and this is sort of the other part of it, is it's almost like resilient individuals have a battery that they've charged, right? They've got this reserve of energy that is
Yeah.
allowing them to handle whatever life has to offer, right? So imagine if your battery is empty, right? If you're running on low, just like our phone, if we haven't charged our phone, it's going to die. Like it's not going to keep functioning. So we have to charge that battery. So this now comes to the second really important point about resilience. And this is from the American Psychological Association. And again, tons of research, but this statement in particular is that resilient individuals have habits and behaviors, take actions, and have thoughts actually that make them resilient, right? So engaging in habits and behaviors that make them resilient, which charge their battery. So when something happens, they actually have the reserve to be able to handle it with grace and ease.
Got it. So what
Right.
are some examples of
Yeah.
ways that we can be more resilient? Now, again, talking about the busy
Right.
leader who has no minutes in their life.
This is amazing, right? Because that's exactly what we, who we deal with, right? So we're dealing with the people that actually don't have a lot of time. But when you think about habits and behaviors, the idea is you're wiring them in your brain. So becoming a resilient individual, right? You have to change the inner workings of your brain so that those habits wire automatically. So that breath we talked about, you just start naturally doing it. So first you're using that trigger to remind yourself that every time I walk through a door, I'm walking into the office, I'm going to take a breath. Later on, it happens automatically. It fires the brain and you don't have to think about it. So there's no extra time. But other habits, again, breathing being one of the key ones, right? Because it's regulating your central nervous system, right? But other ones, and where we start often, is with sleep.
Sleep. What?
Yeah, sleep, which is very funny because we train coaches. We have a program for coaches, executive coaches, to become certified resilience coaches. And for them, it's kind of like, oh my God, we're going to ask our clients about sleep. I'm like, yes, we are.
Yeah, because it's a personal thing, and you hear all the time. So I only need 6 hours of sleep and I'm fine, or I need my 9 hours, otherwise, it's very personal. It's not something you can cookie cut.
Right. It is very personal. So I'm not going to assign to people and say, okay, you all need 8 hours of sleep, right? Because it's not about necessarily the quantity of sleep, because people are bio-individual, although there is a minimum generally, because they say only about 3% of people have I think it's called DEC20 gene, which is the gene for those individuals who really don't need more than 4 hours of sleep. So there's very few of us that actually have it. But it's about the quality of sleep, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
How deep you're sleeping. And it's about, so what happens with a lot of my clients is they won't, if they fall asleep, then they'll wake up and then they can't get back to sleep. And then they're ruminating. And then it becomes this anxiety ridden thing of like, oh my God, tomorrow I have this and that. And then it just spirals out of control. But when we do, often we work with companies and we do an audit at the beginning, and we'll work with leaders and we do an audit, a resilience audit. And there's a lot of questions about sleep. And then if they're confidential, we aggregate the data. And then what happens is we find out that in aggregate, many people are saying that they're exhausted when they wake up, right? So we're doing something wrong. Because again, think about it, when adversity strikes and you're exhausted and you're running on low, you don't have a lot to handle. So you will go into fight or flight quicker, right? You're going to peak your cortisol levels and your adrenals. That's not a way to make decisions. That's not a way to show up, again, as a leader. But when you're rested, right, your whole system's working better, right? We all know this. We all know, like, if you've gotten off a plane traveling from across the, another part of the world, you're exhausted, you can't think, you kind of feel fluish, right? Like, it's just, you're not at your best, right? We're talking about peak
brain fog and
right. So we're talking about peak performers. We want to be at our best. You want to be sleeping. What are some things you can do right away? You actually shut off your phone. Blue light at night, if your phone actually, and your Netflix, your screens, because what's happening is your blue light at night in the evening is triggering, it's preventing your melatonin levels, which is that hormone which helps us regulate sleep, right? So you're actually telling your brain, your pineal gland, which secretes the melatonin, that it's daytime. So what's happening is even if you can fall asleep, it's going to wake you up. So one of the things I was dealing with, I had a client who was an executive director of a large organization, and she hadn't slept in months, she said, right? So she was a really bad sleeper, and she said it was probably because she was menopausal and her life was so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, of course, she was in, again, her role was such that she felt that people needed to reach her all the time. So she was very wary about shutting off her phone. But I asked her to try with me for one night. And what she did is she gave her executive assistant her husband's phone number. So in case somebody needed to reach her, they would be able to call that way. Anyway, so what we did is I literally had to work with this woman like a child. Like I had to coach her through. I'm like, it's going to be, you're going to put your phone away. I wanted 8 o'clock. We landed on 9 o'clock. She put it away. She took a bath. She didn't turn on TV. She didn't watch Netflix. She didn't think about anything to do with books. We literally had her take a bath and read a magazine and have a tea. She actually was like, oh my God, this is so nice. This is so indulgent. Like, oh my God, I don't ever do this.
Mm-hmm.
She's just still wrapped up in work all the time because she would check her phone. So even though she wasn't really working, she was in the back of her mind, she was constantly at work, plus getting that blue light right in her face. So anyways, she ended up going to bed. The next day she texts me when she turns her phone on and says, that was the first night I slept through the night in 5 years.
Wow.
Couldn't believe it. And she was like, I feel so good. I feel like 10 years younger, blah, blah, blah.
So bedtime routine that doesn't include blue light is something that could help you sleep better.
Yeah.
So many of us, we just want to numb ourselves, right? We had this insane day, 9 o'clock rolls around, the kids are finally in bed, and you just want to sit with your Netflix and you just want to like numb. It's hard not to sit with Netflix at night.
So we're going to, I don't believe in doing anything extreme. I mean, I think if somebody's having chronic sleep issues and is exhausted waking up and is waking in the middle of the night and can't get back asleep, or having difficulty falling asleep or going to bed really, really late, our circadian cycle is such that you do best when the hours before midnight are actually really good sleep quality time. So you actually would ideally be going to bed at 10 or 10:30 to get a couple of those hours in. But if you are feeling rested, I mean, I'm not saying you all need to do this. What I've done is I had invested in really solid blue blocking glasses for the night. So there's 2 kinds you can buy. There's the ones that you can use during the day. And then there's the ones that you can put on at night, which are literally red colored glasses.
Awesome.
And I look crazy in them. And they actually make you sleepy, but they block out 100% of blue light.
Of the blue light. So it is just the blue light. That's so interesting. So we talked about these habits and behaviors. So like having a good sleep routine. We talked about like big diaphragm breaths.
Yeah.
And anything else that comes to mind for helping high performers with these tricks and tips?
So, I mean, what we have a model which has sort of 3 pillars, right? And the first one is physical mastery, right? So think about that breathing, think about that sleep. It's about eating consciously as well. I mean, people are like, oh God, is she going to talk about like nutrition? Well, the way I've actually explained it even to my children is like, we're made of the food we eat. So if what I've said to them is if you eat junky food, your thoughts will be junky, your organs will be junky, your body's going to be chunky too now. Junky is what I'm trying to say. Like,
I hear you. Yeah, you are what you eat, like quite literally the chemistry you put into your body. Yes.
Yeah. And also this idea of like a lot of my clients are saying, at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they have that slump, right? So instead of reaching for the coffee, which is going to stimulate your adrenals, and sugar, which then you're going to get a bit of a kick and then you're going to completely be worse off than you were before, standing up and moving, right? Not a lot, right? So the idea is if you're at a desk all day, the idea is you want to roll your shoulders back, you want to stand up. I actually have people stand up on their tippy toes and raise their arms overhead, breathe in and hold for a few minutes. Not a few minutes, but a few seconds, right? So you would breathe into your diaphragm, raise your arms and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, and come back down on your feet and your arms down. Do that 5 times. I've done that with a couple of my clients, and whenever they're in that slump, this takes a whole 30 seconds. Like, it really doesn't take a long time. So again, it's that movement, bringing oxygen into your brain, into your body, ideally getting a lot of movement in general, right? We're so sedentary, right? So being able to go out for a walk for 20 minutes even to get some oxygen in your brain is really important. But that movement piece is important.
Totally.
Again,
One of the things with COVID, with this whole like working from home and not being able to meet up, last summer, I just started asking some of my colleagues, hey, do you want to walk and talk? So,
yeah,
you normally sit and have a coffee at a cafe. We started walking and I started asking people to walk and talk. And I think it had a ripple effect because everybody got back to me and was like, I am doing this with everyone now, walking and talking. You're clear-minded, you're outside, you're breathing fresh air.
right.
You come back more energized and you've created something together.
Absolutely.
You don't have the ability to maybe take notes as easily as you would in a normal meeting, but it's such
You
a
can
great
then
way.
pay attention more. So what ends up happening is this comes back to the mindfulness. Now the person you're talking with is your object of meditation, and you're fully listening and you're fully present in that moment. So do you see how all these things, we're not asking you to do extra things, you're doing the things you're already doing. You're sleeping better, you're eating more consciously, you're moving more often, right? You're already doing these things. And those walking meetings are amazing. Even if many people are still working from home, have that meeting with your colleague, just take your phone and go out and encourage them to do the same. You'll find many people indicate they actually find they have more ideas. Just there's something about the movement, so they're able to move through situations faster. So yeah, that's a really good one. People, the standing desks, but you don't want to stand all day either. That's not good. But moving between standing and sitting is important, and scheduling things with others, right? Because then you have that accountability, which is really huge when we're looking at creating new neural pathways. We are, again, according to Gretchen Rubin, most of us are obligers, which means we won't do things for ourselves, but we will when we've committed to someone else, right? So when you look at accountability, and when you look at people's probability of reaching a goal, if they just say they've got a goal to themselves and they don't tell anybody, the probability of reaching that goal is something like 10%. But then the moment you have a plan and you commit to somebody, and then you have a specific time set to meet with them and where they're going to ask you about it, suddenly something happens, right? And your likeliness of reaching the goal is something like 95%. So
totally. So let's talk about this, because you're naming off these really easy tricks and tips for people to have richer, better lives, more mindful, but also healthier. Tell me about, a little bit about this neuroscience behind behavior change, because behavior change sounds easy, but it's so hard. How can we be more successful to create these behavior changes? Is it just practice makes perfect, or is there other things we can think about?
Well, so yes, neuroscience is amazing, because it's finally, we're learning why don't we do the things we know we should do, right? And so when we look at all these practices of resilience, one of the things we notice, and my clients notice, and the people, the participants in my programs notice, is like, oh, this is all common sense, but it's not common practice. Right? So what we're doing is we're taking what's common sense and what we know, most of us know, and we're making it common practice. And what you practice grows stronger, right? So that's from Dr. Shauna Shapiro. What you practice goes stronger. So you have to be careful and be really mindful of what you're practicing, right? Because of the neuroscience piece, right? So the idea is we want to intentionally create new neural pathways that serve us, right? We want to, and when we look at, our brain, right? And I use Dr. Rick Hanson's hand model of the brain, right, which people can't see because we're on a call, but the idea is that habits and behaviors are in the limbic brain, right? So they fire automatically. But in order to override the ones that are there, like watching Netflix until midnight and maybe snacking on some chips one too many nights a week,
You pretty much described my evenings
Yeah.
just now, just saying.
So what you want to do is you actually have to tap into your prefrontal cortex, right? To override what fires automatically, right? To those, and there's emotion is also in the limbic brain. So there's an emotional feeling there that, oh, this is pleasant, this is soothing, this feels good. So we now have to use our prefrontal cortex to override that. And that's hard, right? That's where people are like, oh my God, it takes a lot of willpower to do it. So this is where you have to do things like, you have to have the accountability piece is really important. So first you have to make a mindful decision, right?
Mm,
And you have to have a really strong why for it, right?
mm,
Why, right? As a leader, why do I want to be more resilient? Why do I want to be healthier, happier, stronger, right? And a lot of the time when we do this with clients, it's kind of people say superficial, well, of course I want to be happy, or of course I want to be healthy, but really why? Why? Who do you want to be in essence? Or often people come really when they dig, they'll be like, they'll recall their 17-year-old selves and who they had a vision they would be. And now it's like, this is the time. Like, it's not 20 years from now, this is the time. Or they'll think about their kids, right? And being an example to their kids, right?
mm-hmm.
Lounging on the couch in the evenings and then staying up too late might not be the example to, and becoming unhealthy and that sort of thing. So having a strong sense of why.
Of
And
why.
right,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then you've set an intention. You said, I want to be like this. And now we have a strong emotional, right? Because we want to trigger our emotion. We're kind of moving away. There's one of the things we also talk about is heart brain coherence, right? There's something like 40,000 neurons in our heart. So when we tap into the heart and into the emotion of what that'll feel like and what that'll be like, right? As if it's already happening, you're basically helping to create those neural pathways in the brain, right? You're now using your whole body, because what we tend to do is just use our mind, right? But there's a whole body here that can help us out with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're tapping into our emotions, and then what we do is we repeat often, right? So what we do is we do a tiny, tiny little change, right? We don't say, the worst thing we can do, which we all have a tendency to do this, is say, I'm going to overhaul my whole life, right? I'm going to be this person. I'm going to exercise for this and this amount of time every day. I'm going to go to bed. I like you take it all on. Well, the moment you do that, you actually get overwhelmed. You don't do any of
You
this.
set yourself up for failure.
You
Yeah.
do, because your system is like, oh my God, there's actually an emotional model of change that we often refer to in our programs. And it's sort of, first you're really excited about it, but then when you actually start doing it, you fall into this valley of despair because you're like, oh my God, this sucks, this is horrible, right? So we don't want to get you into the valley of despair. What we want to do is we want to take tiny little incremental changes, right? And almost you want to have those wins and you want to repeat them daily. So then what ends up happening is they will fire on their own when you create this new neural pathway, right? So we're creating this new, so now it fires just like brushing your teeth fires before you go to bed, right? You start doing, and then there's a compound effect, right? I think we talked about this when we spoke earlier. One of the greatest books for leaders to read is, or anyone, is The Compound Effect. There's actually a 10-minute little video on YouTube that you can watch, one of those like little cute illustrated ones, which gives you the essence of it. But the idea is, it's again, those tiny habits repeated daily over time have tremendous impact on your whole life. So again, just that one little thing, like you're going to whatever, not watch. Maybe it's just during the weekends you watch Netflix. The other days you actually end up going to bed earlier and reading a book or whatever, right? Whatever it is that you choose that is most important in your life and will have the biggest impact. And then
you almost need to do that healthy micro habit
yeah,
enough to sell yourself on it from seeing the benefits. So,
right.
when you're like going to the gym on a semi-regular basis, which is a really hard one for people, when you get home from the gym, you don't feel like eating chips. You just
Right.
don't. Like I don't know why, but I don't never feel like eating crap after I work out. When I don't work out is when I feel like eating crap. So it's so interesting. Like you said, that compounding effect, you have these micro healthy habits you bring into your day, they will create other healthy habits and others.
A ripple effect, absolutely. And
So
then
cool.
so what we do when we have our programs is we basically take on a tiny habit each week, right? And
Mhm.
you implement it for the whole week. And then, so for example, we start with sleep. So we implement a tiny little thing in sleep, and it might be, again, just shutting off your phone at 9 p.m., or it might be going to bed earlier, whatever it is for you. And you do that all week long, and you don't actually switch it up during the week. You do that all week long. And then the following week, we go into eating consciously, and you do one tiny thing in that area while keeping the sleep. And then we move into movement, and then we move into mindfulness, and then we move into positive like sort of positive
Wow. Yeah.
thinking. And what ends up happening is at the end, you created all these micro habits, and then you're stacking them, and the idea is they're so small that they haven't really changed, overhauled your life. But at the end of 10 weeks, you're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And we start with sleep because people get an immediate hit of energy. Even if they thought they were sleeping okay, they start realizing they weren't as rested as they thought they were. So you have this positive feedback, and that kind of gives you motivation to keep going.
Oh,
And
so
like I,
exciting.
yeah, and like I said, all of this is common sense. So people are like, oh my God, this is boring. This is just, we've heard this already, but it's about doing it. It's no longer thinking, we don't need another book. I mean, I'm reading a book, but you don't need to read more or research more. It's about doing, we already know this stuff, right? And it's about,
Do. It's just, you're right. You're putting it into micro actions and not on January 1st,
yeah,
taking everything on and then failing and feeling like crap
yeah,
about it.
one
Yeah.
small thing at
Yeah.
a time. Yeah,
What
no.
about tools? Like, I have a question about tools. You know, a lot of people wear the Fitbit
Yeah.
and they track their sleep. Do you think that helps or hinders, in your opinion, having a tracking app for how you're doing with food or exercise or
Mm.
sleep? Does that help, or do you try and not rely on those?
So I think again, everybody's different and people are motivated by different things. I see, I don't want to bring up my husband because he'd be like, why are you talking about me? But like he really, it's like, oh my God, I haven't had my steps. Like, so that's really good feedback. And I know at one point, with a friend, they were tracking who was getting more steps, and there was like a slight competitive piece in it. So it was actually motivating them to go, to go out and walk and move more and that sort of thing. So again, it depends on who you are. I don't like those personally, because I don't want something on me that is connecting to my phone. I'm really, I actually shut off my Wi-Fi at night, right? Even though
Wow.
whatever, I have neighbors and their Wi-Fi comes in, but still, I'm like, let's minimize. And so I myself I don't wear it, but I think for a lot of people, they want that feedback. I think sometimes those there's the Aura rings, which are for sleep, and they will give you really. I mean, it'd be amazing to just put it on once in a while to sleep, see the quality of your sleep. Although I think we know by how rested we are, right? So
Yeah. And then that connectedness rather than dependency on looking at a bright, shiny screen to tell you if you had a good sleep. That connectedness to your own wellness
right,
that you can't have by looking at an app.
right,
I hear you. I think you're right. Maybe it depends on the person. I have a neighbor, she's amazing. She's like, I haven't closed my ring, just got to go for a walk
right.
on her Apple Watch, and it gets her out of the house. But for
Yeah,
me, I'm like you. For me personally, it's like I'd rather check in and feel rather than look at a screen and it tell me if I had a good sleep. So it really depends on the person. Yeah.
it totally does. And if it's something that motivates you to sleep better and eat better and move more, amazing. If it again reminds you to take those mindful breaths,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. If it that's great. Like I said, I myself don't want to be connected like that all the time, and I actually want to disconnect. So even with my phone, I mean, there's an automatic tracker in there, but I'm like, no, this is my opportunity to actually go out and not be surrounded by the electromagnetic frequency. And so yeah, it just depends on
Yeah.
who you are.
N- No kidding. This has been really cool discussing these tricks and tips. They sound easy, and like you said, it's about putting them into practice, maybe one at a time, and then really noticing whether or not it improved your ability to focus, your ability to be calm in a situation, and instead of react, respond. All of these wise words. So if people are inspired and they want to find you and they want to figure out how they can work with you, where would you send them? Where can they look?
So they can go to our website, which is www.leadershipwellness.ca. And we've got our programs there. So people can, yeah, you can see our programs, or there's an ability to work with companies or one-on-one. And really, I mean, it is such an interesting time because, people are anxious right now going back to the office. And it's almost like as we finish, I'm like, I think, what is most important? Um, Really having people explore this idea of diaphragmatic breathing and really calming their central nervous system and their vagus nerve, like, and really tuning into that information and then doing it transforms your life. Like it really, really does.
Mhm.
So that and again, we teach people how to do it, and we work with people one-on-one, really just how to even open their bodies up, right? Because so many of us are just
Yes, we're in this like fetal position.
right, and that causes anxiety and depression, right?
Mhm.
Because then you're compressing and your diaphragm, right? So what you're closing it off, so you can't take a deep breath, and guess what? Your body then thinks it starts to panic. So one of the best things to do with anxiety is actually to lengthen your spine, roll your shoulders back, and take a deep breath, and
Yeah.
magic happens. It's so
It's
simple.
amazing how we can tie the ancient traditions
Mm.
of yoga and meditation to today's
Yep.
super high intensity business world and create higher performers by tying these two completely, in some ways, different methodologies and expectations together, and creating a bond between the two
Right.
and helping people perform better in their lives and be happier.
Absolutely. And it's a new way to be. It's not, it's a new way to be. So we, it's the I am calm, I am centered, right? I am healthy, right? It's a new way, and it's rewiring our brain to be that person that be that best self that you wanted to be, and it's possible. And it's just, again, it's the intention, the decision, the why, and a little accountability, along with taking those daily action steps, right? Tiny, tiny steps daily.
Baby steps. I love it.
Yeah.
Monica, I can't thank you enough for your time and for your wise words. Can't wait till your book comes out. And I'll put some information in the show notes for our listeners on where to find you if they or their teams need some help getting onto this journey.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Melanie. It's been so fun talking to you.
Well, thanks so much, everybody. And I will wrap up here. And don't forget to take a look at the show notes to get more information on Monica's company and her upcoming book.